Uh, Thank you very much for organizing this talk on this very important issue. We all know that under which state we all are at, and it's really a very important talk organized by Anveshan. And thank you once again to give me the opportunity to come and share some of my views on this topic. Before we start on the state assault during pandemic, it's important for us to look back that what has been the history of this government ever since they took the charge of serving the people. Now, I would like to highlight few incidents which happened in the past. Uh, we know, all of us know that the JNU has been in target, and I come from JNU, so I'll be talking a bit about what all happened in JNU, and then I go to other institutes as well. In JNU, in 2016 specifically, the university was targeted, but if you look at this period, there were many other institutes, universities, which were already under attack. Many of the student activists who were raising critical questions at that time, they were all targeted, and they have got heavy penalties for raising those criticisms against various government's policies and so on. Now, not going into too much of detail of what all happened during that period, because we know there was FTII, there was IIT Madras, there was JNU, HCU, Jadavpur University, and various other universities in which concerted targeted attempts were made to criminalize the activists. So I'm not going into details of what all happened in all these institutes. But when we look at JNU only, JNU alone, then you see that certain activists were suddenly picked up and they were put under the sedition charge. And till now, none of these charges were actually established. But all of these people were made to face the trials, made to face the harassments by the state. After this JNU incident also, we recently saw in the last JNU-SU election that how the violence took place in JNU. And, a battalion of masked goons entered in the campus. And so far, there has been no single arrest. Nothing happened after that incident. Similar case we can also witness when we look at the Delhi violence. I mean, this is not violence. This is a state-sponsored program because we can see certain similarities and draw a pattern in which this government has been functioning. Whenever this sort of violence take place, you see there is a certain time period which are basically given for the violence to erupt. In JNU's case, we have seen that like few hours where the violence actually took place. That time, the university's lights were off. People were given entry without checking their identities and so on. This happened. In Delhi program, we again saw that the police personnel were present there where the violence happened, but no actions were taken. So all these incidents actually make us to reflect on the question that why this concerted campaign, concerted attacks were being launched on activists and students and so on. A few examples I would like to draw on the similar context is this, that as you know that in JNU in 2016 October, a very disturbing incident happened where a first year student was being mob attacked, and then all the people who were unleashing attack, they have not been put under any charge, no arrest happened, and then this student goes missing. Till now, nobody has any trace of that student. The state which is talking about law, the state which is talking about criminal activities, why are those activities which were criminal were being overlooked? This is the question that we need to ask repeatedly. Um, now, in this entire period, if you see, Najib's assaulters were not arrested. There was there was an attack on Kanhaiya Kumar, the JNUSU president then, in the premises of court. Nothing happened. There was also shooting on Umar Khalid. Nothing happened. Ram Bhakt Gopal, who is on bail, nothing happened. So all these places, all these incidents show, establishes the fact that when in one hand the state is trying to put criminal charges on the activists, the voices of dissents, on the other hand the state is also continuously protecting the criminals who have committed crimes time and again. I want to now go back to a little bit of timeline of who are the activists who are being actually charged under sedition or UAPA. Like first it started with, I think, Akhil Gogoi in mid of December, when Akhil Gogoi was put under the charge of sedition and intention to cause riot against the national integration and so on and so forth. In mid-April, when the pandemic has already started, in mid-April, Anand Tumre, Gautam Navlakha, they were all put on the similar charge. In April 20th, Marsha Zaira, she was booked under UAPA. Umar Khalid was booked. Jamia, as you pointed out, Jamia Coordination Committee members, many of them were booked, like Miran Haider, Safura Zargar. I mean, with Safura Zargar, it's even more critical. She's a pregnant woman, and she was being taken to the custody. And several others, like, the last being, I think, Kavalpreet's phone was seized in her home in connection to Delhi violence. Now, the point is that all these people who were already charged with UAPA, like as serious a law like UAPA, are basically going through several harassments. They have lost their public life. They have lost their normal life. They cannot walk on a street. They cannot. They are always under surveillance, and there is always a threat for attack on them. On the other hand, the people who have actually incited the mobs, like Kapil Mishra, Anurag Thakur, and various other BJP leaders, and the kind of campaigns, the entire social media warrior that the ruling party has. All of these people are basically given a free hand to do whatever they want. Now, what does all of this show? That while the government is failing to deliver on any of the important issues to deal with the present crisis, or to meet any of the fundamental demands by the people, at the same time, the government is trying to penalize the people who are being critical to the government's policies. And this is not new, but what we are seeing is unprecedented, because you see the choice of time in how they are choosing a particular time, like today's pandemic, when the focus has to be more given on strengthening the systems providing personal protection kit and other essential equipments, do more on the health sector, provide food and source of income to the stranded migrant laborer and other people who are suffering. When all of these things should happen, the government is taking this time to basically putting people in behind the bar. This is, I mean, I don't want to like draw a parallel, but see what happened in Kashmir is also somehow witnessed now, because although, I mean, the situations are very different. Kashmir has gone through much more severe onslaughts and so on, but here what is happening is that the people are on lockdown. We cannot go and protest on the street right now. Once you start protesting on the street, and then that goes, that spreads and so on, that has a different impact. None of us can do it right now, and the state is putting all of these activists who were at the forefront to defend the constitution of the country, to defend the secular fabric of the country. They are facing these trials, they are facing these charges. This is what is important, because in all the CAA protests, we were also engaged with some of the CAA protests in different places. And we saw that, all these protests, I mean, if you look at the nature of the protest, all of these protests' nature was fundamentally democratic. There were no violence. There were no violence until the state wanted to create a violence. So till then, that was democratic. When they completely failed to provoke this section of people who were protesting, they started unleashing violence. The riot happened, and it is not only like a Hindu-Muslim issue. It is a issue which where people from all the sections, particularly those who have nothing, particularly the people who belong from the vulnerable sections, they are the people who have lost their shops. They are the people who have whose houses were burned. We were engaged with some of the relief activities, and we have got calls from people belonging to various religions. So it's not one religion people who got affected, but definitely the target, the campaign was targeted towards a particular community, and the subsequent narrative was also built to vilify this community, and a reflection of which we can also see at present, like during the pandemic, even now, I mean, till date, the campaigns are going on, the social media, WhatsApp forwards and so on are going on, which is particularly targeting a community. So in one hand, there are like targeting the activist, in one hand, on the other hand, they're targeting the community. It's a multifaceted attack that is going on right now. But what is important for us to realize that how do we respond to these questions? How do we respond to these kinds of attacks that are going on? Because I believe that if we continuously raise the issues that affect the people, the government has no answer to that. Right now, the pandemic has proved the situation of health sector in our country. The pandemic has also proved that what is the condition of our economy, what is the condition of the poor in the country, many of the vulnerable sections in the country. So if we keep on raising the demands continuously vis-a-vis these attacks, then I think that in some way or the other we will be able to channelize the support, public support against government's very criminal mindset. And UAPA, about UAPA particularly, what I want to mention is when there is like under this unlawful activities prevention, many of these people were actually many of these people's life were put under jeopardy. None of these, I mean, many of these activists we know personally, we have worked with them, we know their politics. Uh, they have never raised any anti-India, anti-national slogan and so on. But right now, there is an attempt to, criminalize them, put the public perception against these people, so that whether or not you emerge victorious after the trial, you are already a criminal, on the in the public. Your image in the public is already a criminal image. So it doesn't matter whether you win the case, whether you come out of this case, but as long as this campaign, this hateful campaign is going on, the threat persists. And that is why it is important for us who believe in the progressive politics, who believe in having critical voice in democracy. We need to provide our resolute support with all these people who are right now facing uh, this this kind of attacks right now. I would also say a few things about today's development, that you have already noticed that how Kapil Mishra has picked up a word and started targeting Sapura in online campaigns and so on. There have been all subsequent online campaigns against her, very misogynistic campaign against her and so on. Today, fortunately, the Delhi Women's Commission has come up with the notice to the Delhi police, saying that all these people who have been involved in targeting her in online campaign and so on, there should be arrests, and the report of that should be submitted to Delhi Women's Commission. We believe that that is a welcoming step. However, I think that there has to be multiple campaigns from our side in order to protect the rights of all these individuals who are facing this criminal charges, false criminal charges put by the state right now. I think I can elaborate more if there are more questions coming. And thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Satarupa. I'd invite Tara now. Tara, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me here. It's such an important subject, and one that we have been struggling with during this lockdown, but honestly from much before as well. I think I would say that it started somewhere around last year with the extension of the Bhima Koregaon incident into arrests of activists. And it reached what I thought was a zenith in... can you still hear me? Because your video is frozen for me.
Yes, we all of us can hear you.
Okay, great. It reached what I thought was a zenith in December with the protests that led to the arrests of several persons in Simapuri and Jafrabad and Daryaganj. And I was involved in that Daryaganj case. So I hope you all will forgive me for taking that as an example. But what stands out for me in that incident is the impunity with which the police rounded up tens of people. At the police station, they had kept anywhere between 60 and 70 people, and they weren't allowing lawyers, etc., in at all. Eventually, they allowed some lawyers to enter, after which we were able to sort of get many people out. They released many people, but they managed to hold back around 15 odd people. Now, how do the police identify and make arrests and so on and so forth? They do it by, I feel, figuring out who is the least likely to get out of a situation more than anything else. And that is what happened to some extent in Daryaganj. got muted. Securing bail for those people who were arrested at Daryaganj proved to be a real challenge, and we thought it was the last of the challenges. We thought it meant that there was a collective uprising at the time. But I feel, and I think Satarupa and everyone would probably feel, that things have gotten systematically worse since that time. Following Daryaganj, there was the violence at JNU. And after the JNU violence, of course, we've had the protests in Northeast Delhi, which have been identified as a pogrom. They've attracted a lot of press, etc. But there has been precious little, in my opinion, done to redress the actual violence caused. And there's been precious little to investigate acts of violence, though there is a lot of activity surrounding those Northeast Delhi riots. What I feel in my experience as a lawyer is that the police is becoming smarter, the courts are becoming smarter, and the states are becoming smarter. And I'm not sure how well we are all able to keep up. Our strategies for resistance, for revolt, for protest, for action through litigation have to evolve and change constantly. So in the beginning, we were seeing, badly drafted FIRs, patently obvious forgeries in statements and so on. And we were able to bring many facts before courts, which would then allow us to secure civil liberties for people arrested or detained. Now, police are applying non-bailable sections to begin with. They're applying sections which involve punishment of more than 10 years, because those are the sections in which bail will not be granted as a matter of course or right or over time. They're also applying sections of UAPA, as Satarupa said, and they are basically making FIRs which are so omnibus, so broad in nature, that you have absolutely no idea what you are being called into questioning for and what you may be arrested for in that FIR. So for instance, a crime branch in Delhi is investigating all the cases in which a death has occurred or near death has occurred. Now, the crime branch FIRs will revolve around the death of, say, Head Constable Ratan Lal, who was tragically killed during the violent incident in Northeast Delhi. Yet, the inspector in charge will summon people who had organized protests, who may have spoken there, who may have given relief in the days after the arrest. They will ask them, after the incident, they will ask them to identify people, their comrades and so on, in videos. And if they fail to identify people, if they fail to arrive at the real culprits, then anybody can be made into a culprit. And we really don't know what the veracity of the case against any person is. Now, typically, I have been a lawyer for complainants, more than for accused persons and more than in defense. But now I find that there is a disturbing trend of victims becoming defendants and accused persons themselves. In relation to the Northeast incidents, Northeast violence, I don't even know what to call it anymore because the right word is pogrom, I suppose. In relation to that pogrom, anybody who made a complaint of violence against themselves, for instance, if somebody said, I was shot, and made a complaint to that effect, we are now finding that those people are also being called in for questioning, because the one thing that the police doesn't have to prove in relation to those persons is their presence in the area at the time of the pogrom, the riots. And where the victim becomes themselves the accused, not much is left by way of asking for civil liberties. I mean, we're running around saying, oh, please make sure his caste is changed in jail, rather than actually arriving at any holistic investigation into what happened. The police claims to have arrested anywhere into upwards of 1,500 to 2,000. They've let out different figures as to the arrests, and a large number of arrests have taken place during lockdown. One interesting fact about the arrests during lockdown is that lockdown began, I believe, on the 24th of March. The violence in Northeast Delhi was variously at the end of February, starting around the 23rd to the 26th or so. That means that all the arrests during lockdown have been 1 full month after the violence took place in the first place. In other words, they are not emergent arrests. It is not a case of where somebody stabs another person and the culprit is picked up on a 100-number call. These are calculated arrests done after investigation. If they could wait 1 month, they could wait 1 more month for lockdown to end, but the police did not want to wait under any circumstances. In fact, they were directed to not wait, which itself is a big question of constitutional law. Can that ever be permissible, that in a situation where your access to justice is severely limited, where there is a lockdown, where there is a pandemic, can police arrest as though things were normal even, forget about emergent? So the MHA issued a directive, I think it was earlier this month, saying that there must be no hindrance to the probe in the violence against in the northeast of Delhi, and that arrests must be made and must be continued. That MHA directive by the central government is in complete contravention and contradiction, not contravention, I'm sorry, to action taken by two states. One, of course, is the state of Kerala. The Kerala High Court had, in an order, passed directions regarding arrest and told the police that you cannot arrest anyone except where the arrest is imminent, means it has to be made, and also emergent. So they had placed a fetter on the power of the police to make arrests, which fetter should anyway exist in the sense that arrest should only be made when absolutely necessary. An arrest is made during investigation, which means that the person's guilt is not established in any case. So that was Kerala High Court. And even in Punjab and Haryana, there was a high-powered committee set up to look into decongesting prisons, which is a committee that has been set up across the country in various states. That committee came out with guidelines for fresh arrests and directed the police not to make fresh arrests unless the same were urgent and emergent and imminent. Contrary to this, the MHA has issued a direction to Delhi police saying do not slow down the probe into the violence in Northeast Delhi and do not stop making arrests. What does this mean during lockdown? The first step after an arrest is that the person is informed of their rights, supposed to be informed of their rights. They're informed of the grounds of arrest, their family also. They are produced before a magistrate in a court where they may engage a counsel or they may themselves bring any facts to the magistrate that are relevant to their arrest or to the case. And they are also supplied copies of the FIR, of the remand application, etc. And they oppose the remand. Remand means simply the court will say whether this person should be taken into custody or not. Now, at the start of lockdown, due to the fetters in movement, the remand started taking place in jail itself. So it was almost like a foregone conclusion right at the beginning that a person is arrested, they are produced in jail before the remand magistrate, and that remand magistrate will pass an order. That remand magistrate has to apply its mind. It's a judicial function. Not every person, arrest can never be automatic, custody can never be automatic, and you have to have the opportunity to challenge a remand. Unfortunately, jails are not accessible to lawyers like me and many of my colleagues. In any case, we would be risking our own safety and security if we tried to make it to jail or even to a court of law to oppose remand. No video conferencing facilities were made available. In any case, things happen in too much of a rush at the stage of first arrest to give proper legal representation to an accused person in jail. The DLSA councils, that's the Legal Services Authority, are thankfully present in jails. So we have Mandoli and Tihar jails, which are staffed at which there's a permanent room set up for a court, and there is a permanent legal aid council. But one fundamental aspect of access to justice is actually the right to counsel of your own choice. So that choice has just been taken away during this lockdown period, because even if the person could contact their family, could contact lawyers, they are not able to do so because their lawyers and families cannot reach the place of remand. Similarly, provision of papers is impossible. The police is not supplying documents like FIRs and remand papers, etc., which are crucial in this stage to further the trial and further the defense of the person who's being put in behind bars. These papers are not being supplied to the families, they're not being supplied to the accused. Worst of all, legal mulaqat, which is the right of an accused person to meet their counsel at fixed timings in jail, those are impermissible. So the access to justice at this time is so limited as is. And then for there to be a direction to not just continue as normal, but in fact actively make arrests in relation to a large-scale violence where there is obviously going to be problems of identification, people pointing fingers at other people, and so on and so forth, where any investigation is likely to take time actually, it's completely unconstitutional in my opinion. Now, the courts are yet to take a view on this. Nobody has dared approach the courts, actually. And I know that I will be thinking twice about approaching the court, because worse than the central government giving a carte blanche at a time like this is the courts giving a carte blanche at a time like this. So we are now forced to reckon with the circumstances and take decisions like whether we should file for bail or try to seek some redressal of rights, or whether we should just let the law stand as it is and not disturb it, so that when the dust settles, a couple of months pass, we at least have something to pin our hopes on, and then can approach the courts, which of course means that people will be sitting in jails. People's remands won't be opposed, and there'll be less access to justice no matter what we do. Now, not only is the police continuing to make arrests, they are also continuing to do investigations. In that investigation, they summon people to come for evidence. We have seen cases where they will go to pick somebody up from a home, not find them, pick their father or their relative, and question them for hours, keep them for hours in the police station, and say, you bring this person or you produce this person on the next date. They make them sign a bond in the police station, and that bond then becomes binding on a father or a brother who has been directed to produce his or her relative. So that is one very troubling area. And the other thing that's been happening is arrests and detentions at random, questionings at random. So police will go to a particular area and they will simply round up a few people from that area and question them. Overwhelmingly, and I think it needs to be said, overwhelmingly the people detained and arrested are Muslims. And it's extremely ironic that there is a pogrom in which the majority of deaths are Muslim, and then in the investigation, the majority of arrestees and accused persons are also Muslims. Something doesn't match up in the story here at all. And it's been taken note of by the Minorities Commission. On the 6th of April, the Minorities Commission actually sent out a notice about random arrests and agitations. But unfortunately, we all know that what has happened to the head of the Delhi Minorities Commission. There's a case been registered against him as well. Which leads me to, I guess, my last point, which is that the law does not seem to apply equally at all to anybody, because we can count, I think, easily 5 or 6 hate speech and sedition FIRs that have been registered as reported in the media. I mean, from Prashant Bhushan, Delhi Minorities Chief, and then even Safura and all of these people are not indicted in sedition as yet. I believe it's UAPA, but still it's because of their role in public speaking and speaking out against the state. Yet, Kapil Mishra, Anurag Thakur, Parvesh Verma, Yogi Adityanath, none of these people's speeches qualify as hate speech as per the state. The problem is that we are speaking a different language altogether. It is a situation where say I say that I will not be having children, and somebody else says the same thing as an allegation against me. How do I explain to that person that this is choice and not allegation? And I feel that we are hitting a wall when it comes to communicating to courts, communicating to the police, that certain things just don't constitute offenses. For instance, in the Bhima Koregaon case, or what the Kashmir police said, what the SIT said about Umar Abdullah, they said his influence over the public is writ large in his ability to get people to vote in times when there is repression in the state. Now, how do you argue with that statement, which is just not logical in its own way? I mean, we are speaking different languages altogether. So in a case against Anurag Thakur and Parvesh Verma, a complaint was filed by the CPIM Politburo member Brinda Karat as far back as the end of, I believe it was the end of January. No action was taken on that complaint, so she moved court, the lower courts, and the lower courts were taking the issue up. and it was being heard and so on. And then somewhere in the middle of the month, Kapil Mishra's radical statements came out, after which a petition was filed in the High Court, which made allegations against Kapil Mishra and so on and so forth. That meant that the lower court proceedings got scuttled. But one very important report was filed by the Commissioner of Police, or the Special Commissioner of Crime, Special CP Crime, in the lower court. That report said that there was no instigation and no particulars of hate speech were made out on the statements made by Anurag Thakur and Parvesh Verma. In other words, Goli Maro Salon Ko or Desh ke Gaddaron Ko does not constitute hate speech, according to Delhi police. Now, if the courts take this same view, what do we say? It seems so intuitive to all of us, I feel, to say that this is hate speech, this is instigation. The courts don't feel that way. They may. Well, the jury is still out on that. They may still feel that way, but the police doesn't feel that way. That is their stated position on record, which means that the government doesn't feel that way. When the matter did finally come up in High Court, the Solicitor General said that the time is not conducive to register an FIR against these people. If the time was not conducive then, the time is not conducive during lockdown, and it is not conducive after lockdown. That can only mean one thing, which is that you don't believe it's hate speech. And why don't you believe it's hate speech? Because it is said by one set of people. If similar statements are made by other sets of people, that will constitute hate speech, such as Prashant Bhushan's tweet, or the statement by the Delhi Minorities Commission chief, and so on. So I think our presumption that the law applies equally, or that we are speaking of the same language across the bar, the bench, and across groups of people, is itself at present wrong. And I think that, to me, is the most disturbing part of today. And I think one of the things that we should discuss is how to take it forward. Because how do we communicate across this very large logical barrier that exists between the state agencies and all of us who are here in this discussion and who continue to talk and work in certain ways? Because until we cross that barrier, all our education is wrong, our expectations are wrong, the parameters with which we think are wrong, and the strategies that we use to further civil liberties, to protest and dissent, will be wrong. And I think I'll end that there.